educators this webinar series, and very grateful to Dr. Pionkowski and Mr. Rick Schaffner, who presented the last two webinars, and Mr. Schaffner for his conclusion of the series today, so that educators more knowledgeable are more capable of inspiring their students in their work. I want to thank the steering committee members for their time and reflections. I also want to thank our supporter education organizations whose partnership in this time of challenges to narrow our curriculum and to encourage subject and book banning are inspiring in and of themselves. Thank you for your courage and conviction. And now I welcome Scott Koenig, the department's social studies consultant. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. My name's Scott Koenig, and I'm a social studies consultant with the Michigan Department of Education. We're thrilled to have all of you in attendance as we continue the comprehensive history webinar series. Before I introduce today's session moderator, I want to share a few housekeeping announcements. Participants' video and chat features have been turned off. Questions for our presenter may be added using the link that I'll provide in the chat and will be addressed in a Q&A session toward the end of the event if time permits. Also, if you would like sketches, please be sure to sign in on the sketches link that I will again provide in the chat. And I'll do this several times throughout the presentation today. You can adjust your speaker view options anytime by selecting the view button at the top right of the Zoom window. The session is being recorded, and towards the end of today's presentation, a survey link will also be placed in the chat. So please provide us your feedback. We want to know. Closed captioning and an American Sign Language interpreter has been provided. If closed captioning isn't automatically visible, select the CC option and select Enable. Your interpreter for today is Rebecca Ritchie. Thanks, Rebecca, for being with us. Now, and back with us today is our esteemed moderator, Mr. Rick Schaffner. Mr. Rick Schaffner has over 20 years of experience in public, private, and international education, 13 years of which as a central office school administrator at the district and county level in curriculum and instruction in Michigan. Rick has been responsible for multiple areas of leadership experience globally, including curriculum, program and resource design, new school concept design, teacher and school leader professional development, school improvement facilitation, grant writing, and school partnership building. Currently, Rick is the manager of the education outreach for the Zekelman Holocaust Center and is responsible for working with teachers to develop their Holocaust education knowledge and teaching practice, as well as working with schools across Michigan to connect educators and students to the many resources available at the HC. It is a privilege to have Rick with us today. Thank you, Rick, for meeting with us today. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure to be back with you all. And welcome to everyone here today. As we kind of wrap up this session, we realized in the last couple of sessions that while we've talked about some great strategies, we really wanted to give you some resources as educators on teaching the Holocaust most effectively and filling those gaps. Just a brief reminder for those who attended the first two sessions, but also for those who are new, the Zekelman Holocaust Center was actually founded in 1984. It was the first one of its kind in the United States. We receive about 65,000 visitors each year, and we have a lot of programs for students, teachers, and educators. We really do believe in our mission, which is to engage, educate, and empower by remembering the Holocaust. So we take our work seriously when it comes to education and the delivery of instruction around Holocaust education. Today's session, we're really going to bring home what we kind of talked about in the first two sessions. But even if you missed those, we're really going to focus on aligning our core principles and instruction and pedagogical principles along with state standards, particularly with practices and resources. Our goals for today include really providing a clear understanding of the resource-based resources that are available to educators. Many don't realize there's a lot of great stuff out there, many of which are free, that you can use to actually build your Holocaust program much more effectively. Those include using things like oral testimonies and artifacts. We also want to provide a bit of an overview or a comprehensive overview of some of the free resources that are available for you to teach the Holocaust effectively. We will share some very specific sites and resources that you can use. And then we also want to share a specific resource, particularly for those that, whether you teach language arts or you're looking to build more literature into your curriculum at the social studies level, some tools that we've designed that help you choose appropriate literature resources that will support Holocaust education. Just a quick reminder, because we understand that when you're teaching any subject area, we always have to follow our high school content expectations. Those don't go away. Those are always going to be there. And then specifically when we're talking about social studies, we also have to remember the instructional shifts that are built into the Michigan standards that come out of things like C3, particularly things like developing important questions, inquiry, and creating collaborative context. One that we always like to focus on here is also articulating like a historian and taking an informed action. But then with that, we want to overlay those with the pedagogical principles. And these specific principles come from echoes and reflection, but they also provide good, sound educational practice. And what you'll notice is that these practices do overlap very nicely with the instructional shifts. And at the end of the day today, our goal is really to show you quality resources so that we can share the other perspectives that often get left out in Holocaust education, and particularly the human story. So let's talk a little bit about typically what we see in classrooms. And we know that many teachers, particularly social studies teachers, always go and they do additional research and they bring other things to the table. But typically, when we think about Holocaust education, and we use the typical resources that maybe a school district might provide, or a teacher might have easy access to, like textbooks, websites, articles, things of that nature. Those are all great things and good tools to use, but there are other things that we have to build in. And we understand that teachers also, they may lecture, they may do some worksheets to answer some questions. They may even throw in some research papers and do some projects like the ones you see here, where the kids can go a little bit deeper into the idea of the Holocaust. And then you add in some other things. Maybe we add in some activities and videos, because these are things that we think might hook the kids, or maybe the kids can go even further. But then typically we would ask, is that enough? Now, we certainly understand that for many teachers, teaching the Holocaust is one of many content area topics that they have to deal with when they're teaching world history or standards in US history. So, the question then becomes, well, how much time do I have? And we understand that time is a factor, but what we would suggest is, let's think about the Holocaust a little differently. The problem oftentimes with standard Holocaust materials that are used is that, first of all, it's a very complex and diverse subject. It's very difficult to just analyze using one resource like a textbook. Now, we're not saying throw your textbooks out, because they can be a tool that are used. And for those of you that have newer textbooks, they probably do have some good useful things. But the other idea is that oftentimes the materials that schools are often providing teachers focus on the perpetrator. They don't tell the whole story from multiple perspectives. And usually they often leave out life before the Holocaust. And we would suggest that what's important about learning about the Jews with respect to the Holocaust as victims is understanding their life before, but also their life after. Textbook programs and certain movies don't always tell those stories. The other things that often get left out, if we just rely on one source, whether it's a research paper or an activity, is we oftentimes don't give students the adequate time for inquiry. We don't always get all of the voices that need to be heard, and we often don't have time to include artifacts. If we're using a primary text as our main resource, they may have some essential questions, and they may have some things built in to try to generate some inquiry. But there's other richer resources that we're going to share with you today that will actually get deeper into the kids' heads and give them a chance to really reflect on what they're learning and maybe look at things through new perspectives. It will also incorporate things like artifacts. And the other piece that we have to remember is oftentimes, if we're just using one or two resources, it may not create the most supportive learning environment. Certain films that I grew up with learning about the Holocaust are just not really appropriate for students. And we have to think about things that reflect social emotional learning and trauma-informed practice. So then the question becomes, well, this is great, Greg, thank you. You're saying that maybe I don't have enough resources. How do I fill these gaps? Well, we would suggest a few places, and today we're going to highlight 3 or 4 specifically for you. Specifically, we're going to show you some free resources that reeled in the things that we talked about in session 1, like oral testimonies. There is a whole host of resources available to teachers and educators, not only that incorporate oral testimonies and provide free oral testimonies, but they also include lesson plans and activities that you can do with them. There's a few resources we will also share around artifacts, and then the quality lessons and activities that go with them. And the good part is many of these resources can be used in your language arts class to supplement if you're doing things like Anne Frank or Elie Wiesel's Night or another Holocaust-related piece of literature. Whether you teach social studies, humanities, or you just are looking for an interesting unit, a lot of the activities found in some of the things we'll share today can actually be used in other subject areas. The first one I want to highlight for you today is our center. And well, yes, I do work here. We do have some great research-based resources, and I wanted to show you just a quick snapshot of what's available to you. If you go to our website, which this PowerPoint will be included in the resource folder, and many of the resources you see today that are highlighted will also be included directly for download as PDFs. If you click on our homepage, if you just Google Holocaust Center, you'll see a tab called Learn, and you'll see underneath that a whole host of things, our professional development opportunities, for example, our writing competition, but the Educator Resources tab, which is this tab here, you will find a whole host of resources. Today, we're going to talk in a little bit, when we get into the artifacts specifically, about inside the glass case, survivor art, and using a lot of these resources, particularly from survivors as well. You'll see that we have testimonies. Another piece we'll cover today is our rubric for Holocaust literature for classroom use, which is another great opportunity. There's also an anti-bias unit here if you are doing something that isn't Holocaust related, but you want to talk about bias. And then we also have teachers' guides for using primary sources that we find on our site. So if you click on any one of these, what you're going to find is a whole host of things that actually provide lesson plans and also resources for you. And I'll talk about some specifics here. But our website is one of the first resources we want to share with you today. The next major resource that we suggest is Echoes and Reflections. And if you're not familiar with Echoes and Reflections is a organization that was developed in the early 2000s that was kind of stems from the Anti-Defamation League in conjunction with the USC Shoah Foundation and Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Center in Israel. The Echoes and Reflections is a great organization and is really one of the leaders in Holocaust education lessons and design units. Specifically, they have a whole host of resources that we will touch on today. We actually provide a number of training on all of their different tools and workshops. And we are certified to train in all of them. Specifically, you'll see a tab that says lesson plans. And there are 11 different units that are available for teachers, all of which are free. Particularly, they all include survivor testimonies. They include activities and lessons. And one thing you'll see on this site, for example, they all have built-in inquiry with essential questions. All of the items here, if you click the print button, they can actually print a full lesson plan. And some of the ones we talk about today, you will actually see in the resource folder as PDFs. But they have a whole host of things, and they're very modifiable, and they're very able to pick and choose. The videos are all linked, and they all provide survivor backgrounds for all of the survivor speakers that you use. They all begin with an inspiring quote that's relevant to the topic, and they cover all periods of the Holocaust, before, during, and after the war. So when we talk about before the war, where oftentimes the Jewish life is left out, there's actually very specific units about pre-war Jewish life in this particular unit. We shared this site because all of their resources and materials were heavily researched, and they all stem from top organizations when it comes to Holocaust education, like Yad Vashem and the USC Shoah Foundation. The last resource we're going to highlight today is the USC Shoah Foundation program called Eyewitness. Eyewitness is a very unique option. In fact, one of the things you'll learn today, through Echoes and Reflection, all of their survivor testimonies, or at least most of them, come from Eyewitness. They are more than just an archive for resources when it comes to oral testimonies. They have a whole host of other things too, which we will talk about. But these are the three resources we will focus on today, all of which provide a whole host of opportunities and resources for teachers. And they also, many of them provide free professional development. Certainly, we provide a host of professional development. Echoes and Reflections provides free webinars and sessions through partner organizations like us in person all over the country. And then, of course, USC Shoah Foundation also has support videos that go with them as well. So let's talk about filling those gaps. And I'm a teacher, and I really want to build some oral testimony resources for my repertoire. Let's talk about some of the specifics from some of these sites. As I said before, if you go to our site, holocaustcenter.org, and go to the Educator Resources tab, you're going to see a whole host of local survivor resources. And we include these because there is a tab that's called Lessons from a Survivor, where we feature a number of local survivors and the lessons that they've learned. There's great connections to local survivors. We believe that when we teach the Holocaust in Michigan, it's important for students to have those connections to their own state survivors. Now, we know there's survivors all over the state, but it's important for students to find them locally. These are a great tool if you're actually bringing your kids to the museum to learn a bit more about some of the local survivors, some of which do still provide speaking engagements for us on the weekends, so students can actually see speakers if you come here with your family that have survived the Holocaust. It also has a great focus on inquiry for local survivors. There's some great archival materials through our website. And in fact, we have over 600 stories that can be told through our website, which I'll talk about in a minute. Now, the Lessons from a Survivor provides a lot of things like insight. It talks about their experience. If you want to teach students about the resilience of survivors and the survival of experiences from these people, these are great lessons to share. In fact, the gentleman you see on the left, Gary Cappy, is a very active donor here at the museum, and in fact was partly responsible for bringing the Anne Frank tree sapling that we have here on premises. And they also help sponsor our art and writing competition. So not only can students learn about the local survivor, they can also learn about how they're giving back even long after their experience. Another great free resource for educators that can be accessed through our website is the Portraits of Honor. If you're doing a project with students and you want students to learn about local survivors and be able to do maybe a research presentation, you can have the students develop their own documentary after they've learned about the Holocaust to talk about them. They can actually search the site through our website. There's a direct link at the bottom of the Lessons from a Survivor. You'll actually see the tab. They can actually search, as you see down here, by different experiences. So if you're teaching the students about concentration camps and you want to hear about their experience, students can search based on topic. They could search by their particular experience and really learn a very specific piece about the Holocaust. Many of these clips in the searchable database have their stories in audio form, so the students can learn a bit more about them. It talks about what they did after the Holocaust and gives a bit of a story about where they came from and where they ended up. It is a great tool for students to do for research. The next piece we want to highlight when it comes to oral testimonies is Echoes and Reflections, as we mentioned a moment ago. Echoes and Reflections is great because they have a number of testimony clips. Many of them come through Eyewitness and the USC Shoah Foundation. All of them have been vetted. Within each piece, like you'll see here, they can be accessed through YouTube. If you simply click on the YouTube button, you can actually download them and embed them in PowerPoints yourself. But they also include a very nice biography about the individual that you're seeing. And in some cases on echoes and reflection site, they actually build lesson plans around them. When you look at the lesson plan pieces and echoes and reflections, you can actually see within the different units, they all have different testimony and speakers. There's some that are great to use for a pre-study and a post-study. There's one in particular that comes to mind named Margaret Lambert, who tells you her story in one clip before the war, and then when the anti-Semitism waves rolled in, what it was like after. She no longer had friends. And this particular woman was a gymnast that was supposed to go into the Olympics. The other thing that Echoes includes with their testimonies is they often have inquiry activities. So students can learn a bit deeper. They can learn about specific things, and it actually allows students to really focus in on what they're hearing and what they're reading in the survivor, not necessarily all of the words, but what the emotions and the expressions are like. There are so many testimonies and echoes and reflections. They actually include a testimony video guide. This is also in our resource folder today, so you can actually see the videos are there. And what's nice about them that you'll notice is that each of these are broken down by how long they are, a brief description, the name of the individual, and which unit they're found in, and which specific lesson they go with. So if you're looking for a video about pre-war Jewish life, you can see that you have a whole host of choices here. We would always recommend, because some of their testimony is hard, that you always pre-watch these, of course, as a teacher before you show them to students, so that you know that there's no challenges for your students, because they could be emotional. The other piece they give you are some really interesting handouts that go with some of these videos. So if you wanted to do an activity with students, they have some kind of question prompts, and students can watch different testimonies and kind of keep a journal as they're watching them, of their emotions, about what they said, about how they feel after they've seen it. One of the important things that we always stress here is including trauma-informed practice. And one of the pieces of that is, when you're dealing with Holocaust testimony, is the idea that we give students an opportunity to respond and to process what they're seeing. And this is a great tool for that, particularly in the last column. One of the sessions we led recently, the teacher said, my students can't write that. It'd be too personal, they wouldn't do it. And they said, so we brainstormed a way that maybe they could do it as a whole group activity and put the question on chart paper and have the students respond using Post-its. For those of you that have technology, we can use things like Padlet. There's a number of ways that we can do these kinds of activities, and it's effective for kids. But there are a number of oral testimonies, as you can see. I should note that's only one page of the testimonies. The last resource when it comes to oral testimonies that I'd like to share with you today is Eyewitness. Now, while I said many of the videos came from Eyewitness into the oral testimonies through echoes and reflections, you can just go right to Eyewitness itself. And there's some benefits to doing that. Particularly if you click on their education page, there's a whole host of things. So beyond films and great podcasts, they do have these around specialized topics. When you log in and you go to I think it's the activities tab, you'll see that there's a number of ways that you can find what you're looking for. For example, if you want a lesson, they have a drop down where you can choose lessons or InfoQuest or just video clips. You can choose what language it's in. So if you're a foreign language teacher and you want to teach a little piece on the Holocaust on a specific topic, you could actually find this in another language. And then they have subject areas so that it is cross-curricular. So if you wanted to pick a theme, and maybe it came out of the Holocaust as a theme, you can actually do that. And of course, they also have a grade level. So if you're a middle school or a high school teacher, it allows you to filter a bit more appropriately for your students. When you find the one that you're looking for, what's nice about this is that on this site, they also include lesson plans for most of their resource pieces, whether it's an InfoQuest or a video. So you can always download, has a downloadable lesson plan, and also includes downloadable activity and all the handouts that go with it in a very thorough description. It also includes graphic organizers in some of the lessons, along with some of the handouts. And some of their graphic organizers are really first rate. The nice thing is there's also localized and translated resources too. So some of them that may have initially been in German or Polish or something of that nature, or Yiddish, often have been translated, or they have subtitles. The nice thing about Eyewitness is any teacher can set up, any educator can set up a free account. And in fact, access some of the resources, they do require it. But what's nice about it is once you set up your account for free, which is the basic email address, you get this dashboard. And one of the cool parts about the dashboard is it allows you to save different things in your own account. It also allows you to invite students. So if you're a school that gives student emails, you can invite students to actually access the materials directly through this. So whether you're doing this virtually or you're doing this in class using your own technology, students can access this from home, they can access it wherever, and it's a great homework opportunity if you want students to watch these clips. Because once again, the clips are all designed to be short. They're not designed to be super lengthy. The other piece that we really like here is they have a video editor feature. So as you're going through different lessons, and let's say you're just doing pieces on anti-Semitism, and you have the capacity to save clips in this particular Eyewitness to your dashboard. And then later you can actually create your own video from the clips that you had and edit the ones you've saved. It is a very simple, very user-friendly video editor tool. So even if you're not a video editing expert, you do have the opportunity, and it's very intuitive. So it's a nice feature that not all free education resource sites provide, that we think is of great benefit, especially if a clip is too long. Word of caution we advise is just make sure you don't edit out the important pieces that kids really need to understand, or the contextual history that's important. So we've seen a few of the resources that are available through the for the oral testimonies. Let's talk a bit about the artifacts. In the second session, we talked about artifacts as being a really important resource and tool. And the reason is because kids can kind of grasp on to the reality of things. And we think it's important because, first of all, we understand that not everyone can bring their student here to the museum. Or if you're going to DC with a student group later in the year, maybe you don't have the chance to go to the Holocaust Museum there. But there are things, whether you're doing a virtual tour through us that maybe you still don't have access to, there are things and options for teachers that we think are important and really good resources that include period photos, important documents, letters from survivors, and artwork from survivors that we talked about. We even have resources about specific artifacts in our museum through pictures that are also helpful. So let's start with some of the resources that we have at the Zekelman Center. The first one I would highlight for you is called Inside the Glass Case. What's really neat about the Inside the Glass Case, and it can be found on the Learn tab that we shared with you earlier, is that we have a lot of bang for your buck, if you will. The Inside the Glass Case is more than just local artifacts. We have a series of lessons that are coupled with on-demand virtual experiences from local survivors and donors of these resources. We have detailed lesson plans, as you're seeing here on the right, that are really tied to all of the topics. They're mapped to C3. They include pieces that we have here in the museum, either currently on display or have been on display. They're recommended for different class period times, and they also include references to your standards. So if you're looking for something specific to teach specific standard, we have a lot of these resources Inside the Glass Case. So what's nice about this is you get the oral testimony along with the lesson and the artifacts all in one. These were created a few years ago. They are very much built to form and provide inquiry, and there are a number of them that are really interesting. I should also note that a lot of our resources here at the Holocaust Center, particularly the ones you see here and the next ones I'll highlight, were also co-developed with teachers that were part of our teacher advisory group across Michigan. We have a number of teachers, unfortunate because we have a teacher advisory group here, because we understand that even though some of us here are educators by nature and by trade, it's important to have the voice and perspective of teachers around the state who are teaching this particular topic. We have some fantastic educators from all over Michigan who are part of this group that also help design a lot of these resources. One of which is Teaching Perspectives of the Holocaust Through Artifacts. This was co-developed with teachers across Michigan and also in partnership with Genesee ISD. They incorporate our artifacts, as you can see here. So Newell's uniform from the concentration camp he was detained in. They all focus on an inquiry design model that was co-developed with Dr. Lee from University of North Carolina. There's a heavy emphasis on inquiry, and the resources are really rich and authentic. The last one that I'll highlight for you today, and again, all of these are in the folder for you, is Teaching with Survivor Art. This is one of my personal favorites. I like it because beyond the fact that it does incorporate inquiry, these are actual art pieces from survivors, particularly local survivors here in Michigan. The top one, Sam Cruciano, has a number of pieces here at the museum. There's a series of really good thought-provoking questions around different pieces of art that are here. It really gets students to think about what they're seeing in the artwork and why survivor art might be an important tool for a survivor. The piece above, actually, this particular artist has a number of pieces here, as I mentioned, that show different pieces of the war. And there's one that even shows the end of the war when the liberators were there to help them. And I think there's subtleties that students might not see that might be fun to do with students in class. These allow you to have really rich discussions with students and really an opportunity to bring in different kinds of resources that we think are very valuable for students. And while these might not be an artifact from the Holocaust or from a concentration camp, they are important artifacts in our mind because they are coming from the most primary resource, the survivor. Moving back to Echoes and Reflections, they have a number of resources as well. As we mentioned before with the oral testimonies, having a resource guide, they also have an asset resource guide. So if you're focusing on the ghettos, for example, you can see the different types of sources that they have. A number of their sources include great photographs, great images, such as this one from the Lotz Ghetto. This is a great discussion one for students to see, to really get a true picture of what the ghetto system was like and make some casual observations about how the fact they couldn't even go from one side of the ghetto to the other, even though they're right next to each other. So there's subtle observations that you can bring out of students through inquiry. They have some great background information on all of these pieces, as you'll see here in quotes, and many of them include activities as well. One of our favorites here are the maps that they include in the Echoes and Reflections. This particular map, for example, highlights what Jewish communities were like in terms of population before the rise of Nazi power. And, you know, there's some great series of questions that you can develop out of this to see what kids notice. You know, oftentimes our students probably assume all the Jews lived in Germany. Well, it's very clearly here they did not. But this particular map resource is one that you will find also in Echoes and Reflection. And there's a great activity that goes with that as well. One of our, probably our favorite piece out of Echoes and Reflections beyond the free lessons is the timeline. As you'll see on the left-hand side, when you click into the lessons and where everything is, you'll see one that says timeline. The timeline is a really great tool for students because it kind of is a great catch-all that incorporates images. It has period photographs like you're seeing here. If you joined us for the last session, we talked about the symbols of hate and the symbols of anti-Semitism. A lot of those are woven into this as well. They include a lot of the background research for a particular date. Obviously, it's chronological. And all of the resources on any particular date are designed to be interactive. And a lot of their testimonies and additional video clips are built right into the date. There's so many great narratives and activities you can do with kids. If you're doing a specific time period that you're working in with kids, or you want some kids to learn a bit about before the war or after the war or during a certain piece, you know, you want them to learn more about Kristallnacht, you have these opportunities to really focus in on specific dates. And you'll see them broken in years here, and then they get even more specific on the hash marks. This tool is probably one of our favorites because there's so much built into one piece. The other thing that you'll find rich in echoes and reflections are specific propaganda and symbols that were used in the day. If you really want to get into, if you get into the anti-Semitism pieces and you want to go a bit further, it even has some contemporary anti-Semitism. I believe we showed at the last session that shows you the things that are even being posted today. But what's nice about the different propaganda pieces, it allows a really rich discussion about what kids are observing, about what do we notice about this particular individual, what is it representing, you know, and then it also has background with it. So there's a number of activities that you can really work through with students here around symbols and propaganda. The last piece I really wanted to highlight for you here is the educator glossary. While it seems like a very simple tool, what we like about it is the fact that many of the terms, beyond being spelled out, and what's nice about the lessons is they also have kind of the vocabulary that will be discussed in that unit. It allows you to, there's actually audio clips for some of the ones that they believe are a little harder to pronounce. And even as teachers, sometimes we're not sure the correct pronunciation. It does have audio clips for most of them. And one of the things we found with Echoes is they are receptive to feedback, because we've suggested they just put it for all of them. Because this is particularly helpful for our English language students, or maybe students who just are, you know, with a learning disability that are struggling reading certain words. I think it's a great tool, and all of the terms, all of the key terms that are used in every one of their lessons are in this glossary. And it's a great thing that you can have students use if you're doing performance and you want kids to keep journals. They can actually refer back to this particular glossary, particularly if you're using technology in class. The last piece, and I know we didn't mention this in our primary one, but I felt I would be a bit remiss if we didn't incorporate some primary artifacts from the World Holocaust Center, Yad Vashem, because there are so many high quality resources within Yad Vashem that also kind of lead to other resources that are available in these other places, that I think it's an important resource and tool for educators. As we said, it is the World Holocaust Center based in Israel. Beyond just being that, there's a whole host of things I wanted to share with you. One is their digital photo collections. They're searchable by subject area. I will click on this resource because we haven't talked about it yet, so you can see the site. What's nice about this resource is they have a whole host of things here. They have digital collections. They certainly have archives. So if you're looking for reading pieces or some reference piece, they're great. But within their education and learning, they have materials, they have videos, they have online courses, they even have seminars. So from a professional development standpoint, there's free opportunities here for you all to learn, but also to find educational materials and videos. It is a searchable database. You can certainly pick any of the things that you want, whether it's around Anne Frank. There's one particular tool that I will share with you that I'll talk about in a minute, called the Righteous Among the Nations. But all of these materials, much like many of the others we've shown you today, have a whole host of things available, from video clips to testimony, and then they have a film series, they have artwork, they have a whole host of things that are really great. And part of the reason we like to highlight artwork is largely because we know that for some kids, this is very traumatic content. And traumatic content sometimes doesn't have to be as traumatic if we just use other things like poetry and literature, or we use pictures that are not as graphic, or we use artwork. But we like them because they also include really important documents. The documents archive allows you to see certain things from the time period that are really important that might be studied. You can see different perspectives and get different viewpoints. They have full-length survivor testimonies. I will tell you that some of them are not in English, and sometimes you may not have the time to do a full length. But once again, you can, if there's tools that you have in your toolbox, you might be able to video edit these, but we're just showing these of it. The online exhibitions and stories are really fantastic and really rich, and we would highly recommend that you check those out. The survivor artwork is amazing, from photographs all the way to really handwritten pieces and hand-drawn pieces that we've used with students. I can tell you that this particular piece in the lower right-hand corner is also used in an echoes and reflection lesson as well. There are audio clips available for students. So there's just a wide variety of things. And while we know with all of these resources, it's very overwhelming, but we would suggest that because there are lesson plans built for all of these, start with a topic first, try one first, and try another. Figure out where your holes and your gaps are that you might already have, or maybe something you're just looking for something new. There's a lot available. And if you're not sure what kind of activity you want to do or lesson, the lessons are available. And use us as a resource. We really do mean what we say when we want to engage, educate, and empower our students. We are here as a resource for all Michigan educators. We have teachers who will actually email us all the time and say, hey, I'm teaching this unit. What's a good way to teach this? I'm not sure I'm understanding this right. And we do respond. We do help. We have a good education department here, and we have a lot of people that can help with that. The last resource I want to highlight is the one called The Righteous Among the Nations. This particular resource is one, and I just did a training last night at Wayne Risa, thanks to some of the mini teachers here. What's important about The Righteous Among the Nations is this is a particular tool if you really want to focus on liberators and people who helped during the Holocaust. Is a really interesting program that they do, and awards that they've given to recognize people from other countries that helped the Jews during the Holocaust. What's nice about it is there's a whole host of names here, and it's a really great opportunity to learn about those who helped during the time, or not many did help. And we have an opportunity to use this as a teaching tool. One of the suggestions that we gave last night is having students do research pieces. Find one of the righteous, and they actually have very specific criteria about the program and why they were chosen, and let the students debate why the person was chosen. Should they have been chosen? Because some of them that you'll see in there might not have initially been chosen. But this is a particular tool I think is very helpful for students and teachers. It's a great enrichment activity. You can assign students by different region to do some research. You can groups. There's a whole host of things that, again, when we talk about filling gaps, it's important to know that not everyone was a victim and not everyone was a perpetrator. There were people that we call upstanders that did try to help. And I think it's important to highlight that for students. So as you can see, this is why we wanted to highlight Yad Vashem. We think it's important, and we think that there's a great many resources available. The last thing we want to talk to you about today is literature. Now, we know that there are some schools where maybe you teach the Holocaust through world history or some pieces in US history. Some schools use books like The Diary of Anne Frank or Elie Wiesel's Night, or more popular as of late, Mouse. But what we want to talk to you about is the value of literature, that while we certainly encourage and promote use of artifacts and oral testimonies, that literature resources are equally important. And we understand that not everybody has a class of some of these books and materials. So we wanted to give you some opportunity to think about the idea that while we know not everybody has access to a lot of literature, there's also a lot of great stuff out there you can use without having to use them now. What we would remind you, though, is before you start to choose what you want students to read about the Holocaust, think about what your rationale is. What am I hoping for when I bring Holocaust-themed literature into my curriculum? Is it really designed to educate students? Is it designed to provide a voice? Or is it just designed for them to read something else about it? We really want you to choose things that are most meaningful for students and really support the goal of Holocaust education and giving perspective. Have you considered what particular work makes it appropriate for your students? There are some titles that are just not appropriate for middle school. Have you considered the impact that particular title is going to have on the classroom and community environment? Are you going to have to, do you send something home for parents so that they know that you're going to be reading this and what the historical context is. And do you have proper time to investigate that historical content? And do you have a strategy for dealing with any emotional impact? So if you're a language arts teacher and you're teaching this title, or you're a social studies teacher and you're building in a title or a piece of reading, have you built in some trauma-informed practice that allows students some outlet to process? Have you sent a letter home letting parents know we're going to read this, it may be emotional, let's work together? These are things that we would suggest. The other piece of things that we want you to consider is, one, is choosing good Holocaust literature for yourself, along with your students. You know, what knowledge do you have? Where are you getting your knowledge? And while it's certainly appropriate for a social studies classroom, we would encourage you to explore challenging social studies and cultural issues if you're doing it in another class. We just got one of the questions I think in our last session is how do we go about doing this as a cross department? If I'm a language arts teacher and I want to do this with my social studies teacher, we would say work very closely, select titles closely. There's lots of appropriate works that might be relevant to what you're doing, whether it's literary fiction or nonfiction. It could be poetry. It could be some simple prose from a survivor that is available through a number of magazines that we have available here. And it helps you really construct many layers of needs support for your social studies students. The other piece that we would suggest is by using outside literature or poetry from survivors, things of that nature, is it gives a human face to these abstract concepts. It helps make it more personal, and it helps the students develop that pedagogical principle of fostering empathy. But most importantly, it should allow students to really develop their understanding and perspective. I think the reason many schools use Anne Frank for students is because they're seeing someone that was roughly their age telling the story while in hiding. And it does help with empathy. So let's talk about some resources that are available. Certainly we provide training to support teaching all of these things. We do think professional development is very key if you're not familiar with certain literature pieces. In fact, we are rolling out a new one this summer. But also use our library archives and research. We have a great research and library archives tab on the Holocaust site. We have a full-time librarian and archivist who is a wonderful resource, and she responds to everyone. And that doesn't mean just Michigan. She responds to everyone. She is great for helping you find different titles, different resources for everyone, and researching your own history when it comes, if you have your own background, and if as a Jew. Lastly, the one tool we want to share with you today is our rubric for literature selection. And the reason I wanted to share this with you all today is because we understand that, you know, you may come to your school and there's a textbook that you're expected to use. And so we're not suggesting that you dump everything you have. What we're saying is you need some tools and resources to support whatever it is you do have to work with as primary sources. This particular rubric was developed out of using the English department chair from Western Michigan University, our folks here, and also Yeshiva University, to really develop a rubric that helps us select appropriate literature in Holocaust education. It has three major areas. And the other piece that this is really useful for is you can also use it to kind of evaluate your text. So if you do have a Pearson textbook in your high school that's being used, it'll allow you to identify any gaps you have that you might be able to fill with other resources. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to throw out what you have, but what it does mean is, okay, I see some gaps and we can actually find some other things to do to fill those gaps. So that's the one of the main reasons I really like this tool. And for those of you that are not Holocaust educators but are social studies teachers, this is really actually can be very applicable to other subject areas, whether you're teaching about civil rights movement, slavery, in particular titles that you want to share. This is another tool I think that could be applied. But what it takes into effect is the historical content and considerations. Has really the teachers looking at the resources they're using through the content and making sure that contextually it's appropriate. It also focuses on pedagogical considerations. You know, if you're going to use this title, think about things like beyond the reading level. Is it going to engage? Is it going to be difficult for discussion? Are there complex characters? Where are the things I'm going to have to backfill and really do some different strategies for? And then lastly, it gets into the trauma-informed practices. How do I does this allow me an opportunity to safely begin this topic through this title? And where are the times that I have to build in for questions and discussion? Do I have to build in time for kids to reflect so that it's safely in and safely out, as we've mentioned in the last two sessions? This particular tool has been developed and refined over the last couple of years, and it is very good for choosing not only appropriate titles, but also evaluating the titles you have and really identifying those gaps. We've talked since the beginning of the first week here about filling gaps. And I think today's session, our goal has been completely to figure out ways to help you fill those gaps. And this tool is a great one to use for filling the literature gaps that you might want. So if you don't have a lot of access to resources, or maybe you want your students to have more reading opportunities, this is a great tool to use. Lastly, I just want to leave you with this. We've been very fortunate here at the Holocaust Center to be part of this series, and we thank Dr. Rice and the entire team for including us in this work. And we firmly believe that education is the best way to prevent the next Holocaust. And the founder of Echoes and Reflections did coin this phrase, but we also believe that here. Without a good comprehensive education in our history, we will miss out on very real opportunities for the future. I want to thank you all for having me today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Rick. We really appreciate that presentation and all of the rich content that you've shared with us. Just absolutely amazing webinar series in full, and to cap it off with resources to finalize is unbelievable. I really appreciate the specificity and the safe in, safe out spaces, and how important it is to really be and have intention with the work that we're doing around topics such as this. But it's also, so important that we're teaching this comprehensive history to our students. Yeah, so thanks so much. Applause is happening. I can
Sure.
just hear it in the background. I'm confident. I do wish we could do this in person so much.
Next time.
We really appreciate it. Our time is running short with 5 minutes, Rick. So we're going to hold off. With any questions that came in, we'll pass off for you and get back out. Again, thanks for your time. Moving on, everyone, we want to say thank you so much for attending our sessions. If you went to multiple, if you just for today, really appreciate it. So thanks for joining us.